Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Faith for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello and welcome everybody, and as always it's a great honor and a privilege to be here with all of you and also be here with Tim Schwab of the God Culture. This is Zen Garcia, and it's been a while since I've been able to come live onto a show. My voice is still weak and quiet, but I won't have to carry the whole show. So I pray that I'll keep the strength to be loud enough that you can hear me. Tim, how are you, brother?
Awesome, man. It's so good to have you back, Zen. Welcome back.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And it is nice to be here with everybody and to be able to share time and space again. I'm looking forward to, being able to do shows and to continue to bring forth new information. It's always exciting to see and to catch up on your research, Tim. And the topic for this evening is very interesting. And so I'm definitely looking forward to getting into and listening and hearing the depth of your knowledge. And as always, brother, we greatly appreciate you taking the time and having the willingness to join us and to come on and to really bring forth these secrets, these riddles to the listening audience. And so, yeah. So how are you, man?
Well, we're gearing up right now. We're down in Davao, Philippines. Our big conference comes up the 21st and 22nd. They booked a sports dome, and they're expecting over 5,000 people. So it's exciting.
Wow. That's awesome. Are you going to be live streaming at all, or
we are
providing?
planning, yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
the host is working on that, so we should have that available. We'll let you know.
And when is this again? Just
It's next Saturday and Sunday, September 21 and 22.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Are any specific topics for the conference?
Yeah, well, the first day we're going to cover Ophir and the Garden of Eden and get into prophecy.
Nice.
And the second day we're going to cover Second Esdras. So
sweet.
Should be powerful.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. And it seems like there are most certainly a lot of eager seekers and to come together, and the size of the audience and the depth of the crowd, that's going to be an awesome experience. And so most certainly looking forward to seeing and watching that on live stream.
Yeah, man, it'll be fun.
Yes. Any new books or any new things, revelations that you'd like to share with the listening audience before we move forward in the show?
Yeah, we're just now launching on Amazon worldwide, about to have it available in the Philippines too. Actually, a small group study, 13 weeks. This is specific to really our first topic, which is finding Ophir and the Garden of Eden. So it's a 13-week series where we've already recorded a live series in the studio, which we're about to launch, probably about the conference time, although it could be a week later, but it's very close to that. And then we'll have the small group study. It's a print book, or someone can download it for free in ebook. It's actually already there in ebook, though we haven't announced it yet. And it allows folks to take it with any size group. Even mega churches have small groups, and they could go through the study for 13 weeks and restore the ancient biblical geography.
Well, that's awesome. All of your books are magnificent, and the way you produce them and put them together, the full of color and maps and drawings, and you've got a great team supporting you, and all the information you're bringing forth, Tim. It's quite amazing. And
this one's exciting too, because we support it with a live studio audience. So they're like half-an-hour segments, and there's 13 of them that will release, over the 13 weeks. And that's very different for us, because usually it's just me talking behind the scenes. You don't even see my face, which is probably better. But it's just me talking, and it's all about the words on the screen, the research, the history, the data, the Bible. And this is different. This is going to be me in a studio. Everything's more, animated and so a little more up to date. And so we're hoping that, this will resonate, especially with a younger demographic as well. But we'll see.
Oh, I'm sure it will. There are many that are seeking truth, and there are very limited sources for such material. And I definitely think that, people are looking to you for answer, guidance, and direction, and that you've been providing that for many years now, and people have come to trust your work and the things that you put forth, knowing that you research them in great detail. So, but we're looking forward to the topic this evening. But before we do move forward, if you could just really quickly, your websites and where people can find your material, your shows, and support you in your endeavors.
So everybody that knows us knows we're on YouTube for sure, but we also have alternative platforms, all under the name The God Culture. So we're on Rumble, we're on Player, we're on Odyssey. In fact, right now we have someone uploading videos to Substack, Brighteon, and several other platforms. So you'll find us in many, many places. We launched a podcast, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it also, does fairly well at times. We know that all this alternative stuff takes away from our YouTube views, but who cares? The point is to get all of this out there. So, and then we've released in the last 4 years, 11 books now, and about to be a 12th with a small group study. Not a big book, of course. It's only like 36 pages, but still. And the others are, 200 plus pages most. So, so we have this overwhelming amount of research and data out there that everyone can partake of. Today, we're going to talk about a story from the Book of Jubilees, which we publish, the Book of Jubilees, the Torah calendar. And that is available worldwide on Amazon. All of our books are pretty much. Amazon, you can still get them in the Philippines on Shopee, as well as just going to our website. ophirinstitute.com is our book website, and thegodculture.com, of course, is our main website, and both lead to the same place. So there you go.
All right. Exciting, brother. Well, let's definitely not take away from the time, because I know that you always have a wealth of knowledge and information to present. So I will turn it over to you and allow you to begin.
All right. So the question is, how big was the Tower of Babel, right? And many of us have wondered that. In fact, I'll be very honest. one of the things for me for many, many years that caused I'd say a bit of a stumbling block in knowledge was stories like this, because they seem too fantastic. It's like, well, how could they build a tower that big, right? And then, of course, there's the alternative theories. Maybe it wasn't a tower, maybe it was a portal, and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that here's what we didn't know all of this time until we really delved into the book of Jubilees. What we didn't know is we actually have the exact specs, the exact measurements for the Tower of Babel, all the way down to the size of the bricks used, which actually engineering-wise work perfect. It's not a problem for engineering, it's not a problem for science, and it's not a problem for Bible, and it's not a fictional account. This is actually a real account. And the Bible can be believed, and that's really the thing. What we found in our research of really testing Scripture is we find out that it vets as truth. It's real. So how did this happen? Who did this, right? Obviously, there's the ancient aliens narrative for ancient structures that everything was built by the aliens, right? Okay, well, we can actually go through that, and we will today. But let's talk about some of the structures. For instance, we have the Great Pyramid of Giza, 451 feet tall, 756 feet wide. Now, that's a massive structure, but actually, it's a midget, it's a dwarf compared to the Tower of Babel. Is that even possible? Well, these blocks used in the Great Pyramid, they average about 2.6 tons each. Okay, some of them, especially the foundation stones, they say are as many as 80 tons. Obviously, they're just guessing, perhaps hypothesis scientifically, but because nobody lifted those, right? So they don't really know, but probably pretty good. Now, that's huge and it's massive, and it begs the question, how did they do this back then, right? So then we go to even the Great Sphinx, which also has 2.5 ton limestone megaliths, same things. If you were to weigh the actual, weight of the Sphinx, if you could lift it up and put it on the scale, it'd be somewhere estimated around 20,000 tons in total weight. It's 66 feet tall, which is no surprise that it's an occult figure, right? It's 240 feet long and 63 feet wide. How did they do this back then? In 2500 BC or so, the date is disputed, but who cares? It's somewhere around there. It's very ancient. It's very old. Well, you get to the issue of, okay, so wait a minute. If men did this, how did they do it, right? Because the strongest human, even in legend, and this is a legend, right, is Milo of Croton, a Greek, about 500 BC, and he's supposed to have lifted a bull and carried him around. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that bull would have allowed that. So I find that very hard to believe. However, is it possible that man could lift that much weight? Yeah, because we have even in this age. When you look at the Guinness Book of World Records, the heaviest deadlift for a man is actually a guy, he did this in the UK, but I think he's from Iceland or something like that. And this was in 2020, and he actually lifted 1,100 pounds. Wow. That guy's a monster. There's no doubt that he's strong, but that's not strong enough to lift one block, the smaller blocks of the Great Pyramid. Whoops. See, this is a problem. So how did they do it? Well, Ancient Aliens comes in and they said, could it be the aliens? I don't know if
Flesh
you've seen
and blood extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
That's what they all
Anybody
say.
who's seen Ancient Aliens, we have the Chihuahua there with the funny hair, but there's a guy with the funny hair, and he's always the one that says, could it be the aliens? Right.
Right. Flesh and blood extraterrestrials.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and we'll address that. But then you have the Egyptian obelisks, dated about 1450 BC, this particular one. Here's one, the tallest one still standing. It's not the tallest ever known, but the tallest still standing. is in Rome, of course, of all places. And it is from Karnak in Egypt, and it's about 150 feet tall. These things, they were carved out of a single, well, here, let me show you. Here is one that is unfinished, where they were quarrying the rock. Look how they did this. Now it's split, so they never, lifted it out of the quarry. But the question is, this is 1,090 tons in weight. It's a 138-foot tall obelisk, and it's dated to about 1470 BC from the Aswan stone quarry. So who would have done this? And then who would have lifted it? And how did they lift it? Now, of course, there's the adage that, oh, well, maybe it was this technology that we're not aware of from the ancient world. Well, maybe. We don't know. But there's no firm evidence of anything like that. So that's just speculation. So, okay, if so, fine. It actually wouldn't change anything. However, we don't have to go there. The reality is we have the specs, and everything that we have in the dynamic of the ancient world is there to build these, to lift these, to carry these. Some of these stones were quarried many miles away because we find the quarries. We know where the stone came from. And, here's one, in fact. When you look at the 30 tons sarsen stones that came from 20 miles away to build Stonehenge. Now, there's been some modern stuff on that, and they're showing people able to carry these in different ways in modern times. Who knows? But the point is, those are huge, and they got there somehow. So who took them there and who stacked them on top of each other is the question. And it's actually not a difficult question for the Bible, nor really for ancient history, other than if we try to overlook the dynamic. Then you have Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. They're saying 9,000 BC. The dating, who knows whether that's actually true. But same thing. You've got these massive pillars and stones that shouldn't exist in the ancient world. The technology was not there that we know of, though maybe some was. And then you have in Tumulus of Bugan, a 90-ton capstone on top. Well, who lifted that capstone and put it on top? These things are impossible, right? And that's Ancient Aliens comes in. Really, could it be the aliens, right? And we have the little alien there saying, really? I mean, look at his arms, right? How can I lift those blocks, right? Well, the thing is there's no evidence of even aliens for that matter. There's evidence of Nephilim and hybrids, but there's no evidence for aliens that we found anywhere in society today. So what we know is we know that we have, something here from the Bible. And in Genesis, we get a little detail that basically tells you this was a massive structure, but it doesn't give enough. And that's where the doubt comes in. People say, oh, well, that's a problem because it doesn't give enough detail to really vet the story. And then they speculate in different directions. You've had engineers and architects even saying, oh, that's, how could you build a building, as tall as even the tallest building today in ancient times? Well, first of all, you'd have to understand the size of it, the foundation, which you're not getting at all. On screen, if anybody can see it, I'm not sure if it's updated yet, but on screen, and what we're going to try to do here is show you some things. Basically, we have a rendering created by one of our viewers who knows AutoCAD. And he went in and he basically took the dimensions from the Book of Jubilees that I'm going to show you. And he shows that from these dimensions, the Tower of Babel would just dwarf the buildings we have today. But it's a different structure with a far more massive foundation. And that's the whole story that everyone's missing when they go in and try to test it and say, oh, well, it fails. Why? Well, because you're trying to build an obelisk, right? Because that's what skyscrapers are today. The tallest structure today in Dubai, it's got a foundation of 161 feet. The Tower of Babel had a foundation of miles, miles in both directions. So this is not exactly, a fair comparison, and they're really not looking at it properly. Now, I'm going to go into the Book of Jubilees here really quick. So I want to show you that's the account I'm going to deal with because it's where the detail is. And we find out it affirms Genesis. And when you read Jubilees, you actually can then believe the Genesis account. Whereas it is hard, and I admit it's hard to believe when you just read Genesis and you have no second witness. Well, the Bible requires a second witness. And see, when Moses wrote Genesis, he also wrote this book called the Book of Jubilees. Says the temple priest. Now, in Qumran, we have a dynamic where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and the Book of Jubilees is the 6th most found scroll in all of Qumran. The 3rd most found scroll is the Book of First Enoch. And yet, we look at these books and just dismiss them, yet the temple priests did not. They obviously saw them very valuable, and they were using them to teach. How do we know? We have all of these community writings, such as this one, the Damascus document, which is going to quote for you the Book of Jubilees from its full title, and it's going to tell you it's Torah. Oops. What? You mean the temple priests used the Book of Jubilees as Torah? And the answer is yes, they did, according to their own words, their own writings. In the Damascus document, we have the specs on screen. You can look it up. This is from Giza Vermes edition, but you can look it up in any, and it's very similar. It says, "For Yahuwah made a covenant with you and all Israel. Therefore, a man shall bind himself by oath to return to the law of Moses." Oh, wait a minute. Law of Moses is Torah, right? Okay, so for in it, all things are strictly defined. Wow, look at that language. Now, wait for this language. As for the exact determination of their times, whoa, wait a minute. So whose times? Well, the times for the law of Moses. The times for the feast, the times for the Sabbath, the times for everything. It's in where? Well, it's going to tell you. To which Israel turns a blind eye. Okay, so who's Israel at this time? This is basically 50 BC to 100 AD is what they date this fragment as. And the reality is, well, that's the time of the Pharisees. Okay, so it's saying that Pharisees are turning a blind eye. They're ignoring this book. But see, the temple priests were exiled to Qumran. And the temple priests used this book, they say, as Torah. It says, "Behold, it is strictly defined in the book of the division of the times into their jubilees and weeks." There's no speculation on what that is because it's the long title from the first sentence of the book of Jubilees. So we know exactly what it is. So those are the first words, and they're quoting it directly. And basically, they're talking about how to keep Torah, and that includes the book of Jubilees. Why? The Book of Jubilees is the calendar. It's got dates, just like a textbook. In fact, it is the textbook of the temple. It's what they used to teach with. And with Genesis, when you read Jubilees in parallel, which is the way you should read it, in parallel with Genesis, you'll find there are actually no conflicts. Jubilees expounds on the content. It's thicker than Genesis, for one thing. But it's not a surprise that Moses would write a second book, because look at the rest of Torah. You have 4 books that affirm each other. But when he wrote Genesis, he decided that he'd apply a different rule and not provide a second witness. Doesn't sound like scripture to me. Something's wrong with that. Now, we published the book. So go check out the research for yourself. Go ahead, Zen.
I was just saying, yeah, out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses shall the truth be established. And that's right. The principle that I always try to apply to in researching and examining, even extra biblical material. And so, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
And Zen, even occult stuff, right? You read it with discernment, and you understand that it's written likely by Nephilim or Nephilim sympathizers. But there's even data
Right.
that you can glean out of those documents. There's nothing wrong with reading
Right.
them. We should read everything. There should be no censorship. So,
Agreed.
yeah, we should teach discernment in the church instead. So,
Absolutely.
now this is not a shocker either, because, well, Moses quotes Moses. Moses in Genesis quotes Moses in the book of Jubilees. In Genesis 48:22, he says, this is Jacob speaking, but Moses writing, of course. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren. He's talking to Joseph. He's going to give him a larger inheritance. Where does it come from? Well, there's a problem, because where this comes from is a story that does not exist in Genesis. It's a story that does not exist anywhere in our modern canon. But it's a direct quote from the book of Jubilees, chapter 34. The whole chapter there is about this, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. Wow. Now,
Wow.
this is a direct quote of the story from Jubilees 34. So Moses affirmed Moses. Genesis affirms Jubilees. Right there.
Awesome.
And again, not a surprise, because the temple priests in the first century or so tell us so, and tell us they were using this book of Jubilees as Torah. Now, whether you do in your personal study or not, that's up to you. But here's the thing. You should at least test this book. And in the front of our book, when we publish it, we provide a Torah test and a lot for you to absorb, so that you can go through that data yourself and then take that and research it for yourself, affirm everything, and add to it in research. That's great. We love it when people do that. We love it when people reach out. We love it when they reach out with questions, by the way. We answer questions, thegodculture@gmail.com. Anybody can ask us a question anytime. Yes, we know gotcha questions, and we shut them down right away because we're just not going to play along with that anymore. We used to in the beginning, and we've learned better.
Right.
So let's go to the book of Jubilees, and let's see what it says about the Tower of Babel account, which really is just affirming Genesis. It's adding the detail of the specs, but that's no surprise, because that's the purpose of the book of Jubilees. See, Moses didn't just provide us with Genesis, he provided us with the data in this book so that we could take it, read it with Genesis, and know that Genesis is telling the truth, a second witness. So Jubilees 10:18. And in the 3 and 30th Jubilee, everything in the book of Jubilees, by the way, is dated like that. It's in Jubilees. And I don't know that all the dates are 100%. We didn't change ours, Charles, that I recall. And we didn't even go through that. We just left all of that. But regardless, the point is you can see it progressing in time. And you can see, whether Charles did the math accurately every time or not, doesn't matter. The point is it progresses, and you can see it just like a history textbook, how it progresses. And then let the scholars go debate. Oh, no, that was 7 years earlier. No, that was 7 years later. Yeah, right. In 3000 BC, who cares?
Right.
So in the first year, in the second week, Peleg took to himself a wife. Peleg is the ancestor of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name was Lomna, the daughter of Sanair, or Shinar, right? And she bare him a son in the 4th year of this week, and he called his name Ru. For he said, behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. Ru's name actually has that connotation. And that's another thing, Scripture many times, concordances will define a name, but when Scripture defines it, that's what the name means, not anything else. So as we progress here, verse 19, for they departed from the land of Ararat eastward. That's interesting. So Ararat is east of Shinar, and of course they came to Shinar. Now, Jubilees, by the way, is very specific about that because it calls the Ararat Mountains basically the Himalayas. Now, that's interesting The last show we were on here on your channel, Zen, with Lisa, we covered where Noah's Ark landed, and Jubilees affirms this. We actually didn't really get into Jubilees on that because there's so much evidence right there, just in Genesis and whatnot. But the Ark landed east of Shinar because they came from the east to Shinar. So now that's something to check out. All the evidence is there in the last video. I won't go into all of that, but I'll cover it a little bit at the end. For in his days they built the city and the tower, saying, Go to, let us ascend thereby into heaven. Yes, their intention was to go into heaven. Now, some will say, well, that's impossible. It couldn't possibly happen. And of course, some have noted, I think Rob Skiba used to always say that the word Babel actually leads to portal of El. Well, maybe there was a portal involved. We don't know that. That's where we get into speculation. We can't prove. But what we do know is that even Genesis is clear that if they would have continued, if they would have been allowed to continue this, they actually would have made it all the way to heaven. That's what it says. And that is believable because of the size of these blocks. The size of this foundation is more massive than we've ever considered. And they began to build, and in the fourth week, they made brick with fire. So brick with fire, all right? And the bricks served them for stone. And the clay, now the clay is not the brick necessarily. The clay is with which they cemented them together was asphalt. So the clay, the mortar, is what it's talking about, was asphalt or pitch in ancient times, in biblical times it's called, which cometh out of this sea, which is where ancient pitch comes from, ancient asphalt comes from, and out of the fountains of water in the land of Shinar. Now, is that a reality? The answer is yes. You see, when you look at the area of Shinar, right, on the east side of the Tigris River, basically, there are actually multiple places. Here's a reference that I don't know if anybody can see on screen, but the reference shows you that geographically, this valuable and useful material has been discovered for the first time in Utah, USA, as well as Western Iran, Kermanshah, and Elam provinces, and it is more durable than petroleum bitumen. So again, if an engineer goes and they try to do math on this and they use petroleum based asphalt, well, they're already going to fail the test. And that's what they do. They do this to apply false litmus tests. The reality is these bricks would stand and would have the strength to do exactly what the Bible says they did. Such natural bitumen may exist in pure form in nature, like lake bitumen, such as Bebahan, Iran bitumen lake. So this is that same area. It's right there. So there are deposits, actually 3 large deposits of bitumen in the area of Shinar. So this is not in any way, inconceivable. We also know that brick, and again, it doesn't say that the bricks are made from clay, right? So we know that the strongest brick is that which mix in shale. And we know that shale also is very abundant in the Zagros Mountains in that area of Shinar. So this is, again, not a surprise. And it's known to have been mined since very, very ancient times. There are even estimates to 6,000 BC before the Tower of Babel, perhaps. But whether those datings are 100% accurate, we know that it was there in ancient times and they had access to it. So when you look at this word tower, again, if you break it down in I think it's the Akkadian language, Bab actually could lead to portal. There's no doubt about that. And whether that's literal or not, really it doesn't matter when you look at Jubilees, because again, the specs actually carry themselves. So we don't have to go to these engineers, who are testing in the wrong paradigm and answer them. They don't need answers. They've tested in the wrong paradigm. They don't realize how large the foundation is, how large these blocks are, and how large the tower was. So essentially, this is a tower, though, in Hebrew, Migdal, and it, is pretty clearly, that. So yeah, the Bible does mean this was a tall building. This was a massive structure, indeed. And again, whether it could also have a portal, we don't know. But again, we don't have to prove that, because its basis is really a false litmus test from the beginning. Then we go to verse 21. And they built it 43 years. So 43 years is what it took to build the Tower of Babel. And they never finished it, understand. They would have kept building, but Yahuwah came down and confounded the languages. The tower would have been destroyed. Were they building it? Its breadth was 203 bricks, and the height of a brick was the third of one. Now, that's data that we can test, because we know the size, so we can take that, divide it by 203 bricks, and we know how big a brick was. There you go. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. I'll break that down in a minute. And the extent of one wall was 13 stades. Now, that is massive. But what we know from the data, 203 bricks equals 13 stades. What's a stade? This is a huge, huge term. And it's something we can connect today. So then we look at the base. 13 stades would be the equivalent of 2.34 kilometers or 1.5 miles wide. Wow. Okay, that's the width of the Tower of Babel. But the length is 30 stades, which is 5.4 kilometers or 3.4 miles long. Whoa. So we're talking 3 miles by 1.5 miles as a structure, as a foundation. No one's done that math. No one's considered that, and that's why they fail miserably when it comes down to it. A stade, by the way, is estimated, it's a Greek term, about 600 feet for a stade, or 180 meters if you're watching this from the Philippines or other countries. And, so that's where the calculation comes from, just simple math. So then we look at the largest foundation blocks. When you're talking about, again, the Great Pyramid, we're talking about 2.6 ton blocks, okay? However, the largest foundation blocks in Babel were massive compared to that, far larger. You break it down, 203 bricks wide, 1.5 miles. That's 7,920 feet. Okay. One brick would be 39 feet wide.
Wow.
A house, basically. And that's one block. That's one brick. And that's more than 5 times larger than those used to build the Great Pyramid. Wow. These would be about 13 feet high. So 13 feet by 39 feet each block. Wow. Now, these would basically weigh, as an estimate, about 13 tons compared to 2.5 tons for the Great Pyramid. So this has the capacity to be far taller as a result. And the engineering actually turns out to be sound. When we look at the engineering, here is actually a technical journal that actually breaks down the strength of wood-fired brick. And they're not even considering wood-fired brick that's mixed with shale and metals and other things to reinforce it, however they would do that. Now, when baked bricks are compressed, they can withstand 20,000 pounds per square inch, which equates to a possible height for the Tower of Babel. This is specific to that in the article, of 10,500 feet, or almost 2 miles high. Now, here's the thing. This isn't that high. The tower was less than that. It was about 9,000 feet, 8,900 feet. And it was unfinished, so it would have been taller. But again, what they're not taking into consideration is the base, the foundation, 3.4 miles by 1.5 miles. And when you consider that, that changes this math, that it could be even taller, far taller, because they're basing it on, the way we build tall buildings today, basically an obelisk structure, the male part of Osiris. They seem obsessed with that. So anyway, so there's a technical journal called Instron that comes right out and makes that conjecture that actually, even based on the modern thinking, it actually still could work out. But when you use the real ancient thinking, the Tower of Babel was real. The Tower of Babel is reality. It's not fiction. It's not fake. It absolutely could have been done. And so it would have been 1.5 miles wide, 3.4 miles long, and 1.5 miles high. Again, that's not an obelisk. In fact, what you're going to find if you go to that area of the world in ancient Samaria, there's a Sumerian temple there that's been found in archaeology, and it's a ziggurat in structure. So it is likely that the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat, if not, perhaps a pyramid. We don't know, because there are no remnants of the Tower of Babel, and they aren't going to find any, because when Yahuwah destroys something, he does so thoroughly.
Right.
So anybody begging for archaeology, you're not going to find it. However, archaeology does affirm that a great society lived during that time in this area and that they migrated outside of it. That's been affirmed by archaeologists. That's not even in question. And that's why some even go for the Sumerian occult myth, thinking that that's biblical. But the reality is, creation occurred, the origin, ground zero, occurred in the East, according to Scripture, not in Mesopotamia. That's the occult myth, the Sumerian legend, not Bible. So when you look at it all and you break it down, and if anybody can see this on the screen, if not, it's you could get the idea. It would have been, 5,433 cubits tall. That's 1.5 miles, or 2.5 kilometers. 8,184 feet to be exact, high. Now, how does that compare to today? Well, the tallest building on Earth today is 2,700 feet. Oh, wait a minute. So it's what? Almost 3 times taller? Well, how's that possible? Well, the base is the point. The foundation of that building in Dubai is only 160 feet. We're talking a foundation of 1.5 miles by 3.4 miles. When you compare this to the largest structures on Earth that we have today that we know of, they all pale in comparison. But that's no surprise, because of the dynamic of the world way back in those days. See, there were giants in the land in those days, and also after that, right? So we know that there were giants. And so the mechanism, they didn't need cranes. They didn't need heavy equipment. They had it. They had giants who could lift these things. For those that say, but you can't prove giants ever existed. Yes, we can. Yes, we can, because Herodotus told us that the Titans, even the Titans, their bones were left over and on display in Greece in his day. So he's a Greek writing that the Titans' bones are there. Now, what happened? In the 1800s, they got a hold of those bones, and especially, I think they're on display at the Natural History Museum in the U.S. or something like that. But the Natural History Museum admits that these bones are actually human-like. Well, they haven't tested their DNA, okay, which is already a problem, because you're assuming they go to a dinosaur. But dinosaurs didn't exist until the 1800s. There's no such thing as a dinosaur. They're called dragons historically. Right. And, the term was made up, and it was set aside as a separate category. Well, what they're doing is they're cataloging bones of giants, especially Titans. They're cataloging them as dinosaurs. And then they put it together and say, oh, well, see, this would have been the femur of a woolly mammoth. except the Natural History Museum admits that they're human-like. Whoops. So now you also have hybrids, and the Nephilim were mating with animals, so you would have all kinds of things that we expect to find in the ancient record. None would be the missing link, of course. But anyway, so the ziggurat structure just towers over anything we can ever imagine. And even if it was a pyramid structure, still, it just, I mean, if you could see the drawing we got from the AutoCAD, program, it towers all things that we know in modern times. But in modern times, no one's trying to build the Tower of Babel. No one is. So to say because we're not attempting it means it can't be done, especially when we now have the data that says that it had a foundation, it had the tensile strength, it had, the engineering is sound for the Tower of Babel to have existed. And again, their aim was they wanted to storm heaven. It was a revolt against God, against Yahuwah. Right. So you look at Burj Khalifa in Dubai, and it's 2,700 feet tall compared to 8,000 feet tall. But again, the whole story is the foundation. The foundation is only 161 feet wide. And so no surprise, it only goes that high. And, in this age, especially with terrorism, you build a taller building and it's a target. So it doesn't make sense to do that for lots of reasons, but we're not even using the same materials. And we haven't looked at the ancient facts, and the ancient facts measure up as, very factual, very truthful. I know I was watching this one show, a new show on one of the, I don't know, Netflix or something, and it's called Dark Matter. And they actually showed a futuristic city and where the buildings were, so tall they were into the clouds, so probably mirroring something similar to the height of the Tower of Babel. But again, the same problem is they still built, obelisks. They did not build it like the Tower of Babel. So it's, even if that becomes possible in the future, it still is it's a different paradigm. They're not even comparing. But you want to compare it to a modern structure, Three Gorges Dam, which is massive. I mean, it's in China, is 2.3 kilometers or 1.5 miles long, or you could say wide, but long. So so that is actually how wide the Tower of Babel was. You want to compare it to another structure. Here is the Colossus of Prora in Germany. It's known to be the longest surviving structure. It's 1.9 miles long. But again, it's not 3.4 miles long, wide. It's missing that. But even that, so you look at that, and now you can start to see the Tower of Babel is 50% longer than that. There's just no comparison. So was it the aliens? And that's where we really get to. And so let's deal with that head on. We have many videos that deal with the Nephilim. If you go to our channel, who were the Nephilim? I know, Zen, you've dealt with this many times. I know Rob Skiba did. I know Steve Quayle certainly has built, quite a franchise on Nephilim data, because there's so much of it. And so we have tons of videos on this, including, did Ron Wyatt find the Nephilim Ark, which we talked about last video. It's amazing that legend leads to the area where Wyatt was looking, but the Bible leads east of Shinar for Noah's Ark. And so it's the Nephilim that claim to have landed in Turkey again. Everybody would have to review that research to see for yourself and test it, see what you think. So we know that in Genesis 6, it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim, the B'nai Ha Elohim, right? That's a term only used, I think, like 4 times in the Hebrew. There is sons of God in translation in English, but it's not that term. And that's only used, the times that it's used is only used to refer to angels in the other passages. So it refers to angels here as well. It should be pretty simple because you have the sons of God and what Saul, the daughters of God? No, daughters of men. So the classification is very clear. These are not the same kind. And what is creation set? It sets a law that they are to reproduce after their kind, right? We know that whatever this was, it was breaking the law of creation. We know these were angels who saw women and took human women as wives. That they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And Yahuwah said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. We have a video on that as well, vetting, is it 120 years in lifespan, or is it 120 years that Noah built the ark? And it actually proves out to be lifespan. Even looking at today, I mean, people don't live beyond 120 years. I think the oldest woman is 121 now. The oldest man's less, but we just don't have evidence of that. You can see through the generations that, you know, of course, Noah continued to live, I think, 350 years after the flood, something like that. And then you have, you know, his sons, their generations are cut almost in half compared to Noah. And then the next generation's cut in half, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. By the time you get to Moses, you know, you're looking at about 120 years. And there's a few exceptions. The book of Tobit says Tobit lived beyond that. But regardless, generally, that's been the lifespan and a limitation on mankind. So then you go to the famous scripture in Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, right? Well, that word is Nephilim, not giants. It's a fine interpretation. It's accurate. But the Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that. And this is where a lot of people, you know, they miss this, and they're like, well, you know, I don't understand how the Nephilim crossed the flood. And the reality is, it's very simple. Genesis tells you when they introduced the Nephilim that they were there before the flood and also after the flood. After that, right there. I mean, so we know that they survived. Now, everybody can debate how they survived. We do have a video on that too. But regardless of what, you know, inference there is there, they did survive. There's no doubt that they survived the flood somehow. So when the sons of Elohim, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, came unto the daughters of men. Now, we know that language means that they procreated with them. And they bear, so obviously they did. And now the women are bearing children. To them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Who were the men of renown in Moses' day? Well, they're the Greek Titans. They're the Nephilim, even in the Bible paradigm. So there is no doubt he's talking about the giants. He says the giants, you know, because Nephilim are giants. Everything's there. And I know there's even teachings in Judaism that try to ignore, you know, and a lot of the church actually tries to ignore that the giants existed. And then, you know, of course, they'll say, oh, but we don't have their bones. Yes, we do. They're on display, Natural History Museum. So, and look, everybody go look at Steve Quayle's research, especially, and he's found other instances where the Smithsonian's come in, and they've taken the bones, even put them on display at the Smithsonian, and then all of a sudden they disappear. So we can see there's a clear cover up there. Who would want to cover up that they were Nephilim? Well, the Nephilim won.
Right.
Hello.
Hey, Tim, so you know, we're going to break in 2 minutes, brother.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
We'll be right back after that.
All right. So, and then God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That's really referring to the Nephilim. Obviously, it's not referring to Noah. He was righteous. He was also pure in his generations, and there's a reason why it says that. So all of this data has been there all along, and it's hard to believe that so many seminaries are teaching that these are the sons of Seth when it doesn't say Seth. it says the sons of Elohim, and Seth is not Elohim. So it's never worked.
Yes. All right, everybody, we have arrived at break, just a couple minutes out, but very interesting topic, and definitely anything about the Nephilim and the giants is something that piques the interest, especially my own. I've always been greatly interested in those topics, and that was one of the things that catalyzed my search and research into the extra biblical materials. I was trying to find more and more on this particular topic. But Tim, you were saying the same for you?
Yeah, us too. I tell you, I think the Nephilim is the single category that really led to a great awakening for me. I think most of the guys would say the same thing.
Yeah,
and honestly, it was Rob Skiba, Tom Horn, and folks like that really just took the veil off. Wow.
Right.
So.
And absolutely, I do agree with you as far as Steve Quayle's work. He was like a catalyst for me, and his research really propelled me in my own. All right, we'll be right back. Top of the hour. 2 minutes after, we'll be right back on.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I am your host, Zen Garcia. It's been a long delay for me in getting back on the air and joining others like Tim and so many other great researchers and speakers on topics of great interest for this what I believe to be the last generation, the fig tree generation, and that certainly the truth and reality of Genesis 6 as we are speaking about it, and the sons of God mating with the daughters of man, bringing forth a race of giants. There is evidence everywhere. And I do agree with you, Tim. I think that a lot of these cyclopean megalithic structures, they're even in the indigenous cultures, in the mythologies worldwide, they were said to have been established, built by giants, especially like the Isle of Malta and so on and so forth. But let me turn it back over to you, brother.
Absolutely. And, and again, Genesis has always said, we don't even have to go to Jubilees or Enoch to find this. Genesis has just outright said it when we just read it. The reality is we could do a whole show on what Enoch, actually multiple shows on what Enoch says about the Nephilim and the whole dynamic of the Watchers. And we could do multiple shows on what Jubilees says about the same. These ancient texts all affirm this, so we know how to read Genesis when we read these as well, because Genesis had its second witness. So, and this is the key. So, but just going into Genesis, we can see that this dynamic is set there. And you look at the word Nephilim, right? Nephil, which plural, you add the I-M, so it's Nephilim. But it's only used 3 times in the Hebrew, right? And the 3 times that it's used, it's actually twice in one scripture after this. So I'll show you. It makes a connection that is amazing. But you look at this word, and it means giants. It means the Nephilim. It's accurately translated, and always has been. How do we know these are giants? Well, let's talk about that while we're here. But first, let's go to the other usage. So we know in Genesis 6:4, there were giants, there were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that, right? So they were there in the days of the flood and also after the flood. Whether anybody connects that one way or the other doesn't really matter. We could all debate on things like that, and that's fun to do. That's fine. But the point is, they were there. And we know that in Numbers 13:33, the other 2 uses really connects us. It says, in there we saw the giants. Nephilim is the word. It's the same word in the Hebrew. The sons of Anak. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Anak and the Anunnaki have synergy, right?
Right.
So really not a shocker there. But even if you don't put that together, it's okay, because here you go. It says, which come of the giants, the Nephilim. It's the same word. So these are the descendants of the very giants from before the flood. I know that there's different theories out there, and I'm not even going to, that's not what this particular interview is about. We can talk about it later if you want. But the big key is that what we know indisputably is the giants survived the flood. Now, then some will say, well, yeah, but it says that all with the breath of life were perished, right? That we're on dry land. Yes, that's what Genesis says, and that's still true, even if a few Nephilim survived. How is that true? Well, the Nephilim don't have Yahuwah's spirit. They do not have the breath of life. Therefore, for a few of them to survive, really not a big deal. Also, there were likely billions of Nephilim. And for a few to survive out of billions, the statement that they were wiped out remains true, right? I mean, if the world was, 8 billion people, right, and all were wiped out except for 3, it would be accurate to start start saying things like, the man was wiped out and things like that. It's fine. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Go ahead, brother.
So we go into the book of First Enoch, though, and we get some detail here that I'll then go back to the modern canon and verify. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants. They weren't just giants. They were great giants. Wow. Okay, whose height was 3,000 ells. Now, I know that many go and they use the modern calculation from the modern ell in the European, paradigm. However, we don't have anything that tells us that that's what Enoch called an ell. So we don't know that he's, because some we've even heard some say, and they do it in ridicule, how could they be 3,000 feet tall? Well, we don't know that they're 3,000 feet tall. That's not what Enoch said. But very clearly here, he's saying they were really large. They were great giants, the Titans, the Greek Titans. They're well recorded and documented throughout occult and Bible history, who consumed all the acquisitions of men, which means they must have been pretty big, right?
Right.
Because no man is that hungry. And it's talking about food, especially. And when men could no longer sustain them, right? So they ate so much that men could not bring them enough food. How about that? The giants then turned against them and devoured mankind. Wow. And, this is what a lot of people miss with the flood, is the flood is an act of grace and compassion. Yahuwah was saving mankind.
Yes, absolutely.
He wasn't wiping them out. And, a lot of people have a really twisted view of that. And of course, that's where you get some of the church that talks about how the God of the Old Testament is an angry God, but the God of the New Testament is compassionate. Right. He's the same God. He said, I change not.
Exactly.
Malachi, right?
Have you seen, I was just going to mention really quickly, and there's a text called Baruch 2, and it mentions 409,000 giants being killed in that particular text with the flood, which is amazing. Right. That's profound.
Yeah. It is, and we haven't tested that particular book yet. We have tested Baruch 1. We published that in our latest Apocrypha volume 1, I think it was. But yeah, you get data from these books that, okay, got to go test it, fine, but wow, I mean, it's conceivable that number is accurate.
Right.
So, okay, so they devoured mankind. But then that wasn't good enough. No. Because a Nephilim, every imagination of his heart is evil continually. So he also had to go, and they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh. So they even turned on each other. And drink the blood. Vampirism is not new, right? Okay, Dracula might be a nice embellished tale, although the guy did drink blood. There's no doubt about that. And he certainly had this thing where he impaled people, their heads on stakes and whatnot. So he was definitely a psycho. But whether or not he had a cape and turned into a bat, well, no, probably not. Why would he need to? Who wants to be a bat? So then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. So it was the earth that called for its own replenishment. Yahuwah is hearing the cries of the earth.
Right.
Wow. I mean, think about that. So he was saving mankind, plants, GMOs, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the second coming of the Son of Man, right? We are there because they're modifying plants today. They're modifying animals today, even like Dolly the sheep and different things, but there's lots of examples. And there are actual labs all over the world working on transhumanism. They're trying to mix also because they can't get an angel to fall and procreate right now. So at least not for now. So what they do is they're trying to add robotics and AI, and that's where all of this leads. It's like this whole AI thing. I mean, you think about it. Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, and yes, I said that right. And all of these guys, they're out there and they're talking about AI and how, eventually we're going to have to modify our own DNA. We're going to have to modify ourselves in order to keep up with AI. What are these people, stupid? Right. I mean, are we really that dumb that we create something that will outpace us and exterminate mankind?
Right.
Probably not a good idea. I watched iRobot, and
right.
I guess they haven't seen enough movies, so
exactly.
So how big were the giants? I mean, when Enoch says 3,000 ells, what was it? Well, we can go back to the modern canon, and we can see that these were truly giant. How do we know? Well, here's some markers, and I'm just going to cover some. There's more. And I know Rob Skiba did this, and he even determined some figures like, the average giant may have been as much as 35 feet tall and different things like that. Okay, I'm fine with that math, but let's see what Scripture says. So if we go to 1 Samuel, it talks about Goliath, right, of Gath. The Gath Tarim, by the way, are mentioned in Genesis 10, is coming from the Hasmoneans. Oh, wait a minute. The Hasmoneans, they're in the Bible? Yeah, in the Greek. It says the Hasmonim, or the Hasmoneans. So they're the ones that are the progenitors of the Philistines and the progenitors of the giants of Gath. So there were Nephilim within that bloodline. So anyway, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. Now they'll argue what a cubit is. And man, do they argue over that. And we've done videos and they'll come, oh, no, it's not, it's not 14 feet, it's 12 feet. No, it's 11 feet, 0.6752. Who cares? They were giant. They were a lot taller than humans today. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
But anyway, the estimates are anywhere from like 9 feet to 14 feet tall. Regardless, what happens when you take a human specimen that's mixed with angel especially, you end up with super strength. You end up with superpowers. I mean, come on, we're obsessed with the Nephilim today. We all watch Marvel Comics. We love this. And, but you can look at it here, and it says that his armor, his coat of mail, was the weight of 5,000 shekels of brass. Again, they'll argue back and forth of how much that is. But we're talking about his armor being about 125 pounds. What man can wear that amount of armor and even stand, whether alone swing a sword and fight in battle? Impossible. The spearhead his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron. And we have a source here. It's called GoliathSpear.com. There's others. And yes, they don't all agree. That's fine. But we'll use this one. So it's 16 pounds, 11 ounces, so almost 17 pounds. And so 17 pounds, can you imagine that's just the spearhead? What man was throwing that spear anywhere? And so all of these things make perfect sense. And again, it doesn't matter how one does the math. These are astronomically large. And the strength is what actually really matters more than the height, though the height is certainly there in Scripture. Then we have another giant called Ishbibbenab, and he was the son of a Nephilim, a giant. The weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass in weight. Now, that's half of Goliath's. So this giant wasn't as strong, perhaps not as big as Goliath, but still a giant, nevertheless. You have Og Bashan. I know many have talked about that. He had a bed that was at least 14 to 18 feet tall, based on different estimates, and 6 to 8 feet wide. That is just too huge to say, oh, well, he was just, elaborate and he just liked big things. No, it's referring to his size, and that's really clear there. Og is actually known as a giant throughout Scripture and ancient lore like crazy. Not a surprise. And it says here, Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. So he was a giant. He's the remnant. He actually, in lore, is known to be the last surviving giant. True giant from before the flood, from that bloodline. Yet destroyed I the Amorite in Amos 2:9. Before them, well, who are the Amorites? Well, they're Nephilim, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Okay, so again, it's not just height, it's strength. And that was the key here. But now here's the deal. Cedars of Lebanon grow as tall as 130 feet. So even if it wasn't a full-grown cedar, this is still denoting a very large giant. There's no doubt.
Sizable, no doubt.
Now, how did they defeat the giants? Now, here's the military strategy. This is so cool. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and roots from beneath. So basically what they would do is chop the ankles, right? And then chop up.
Right.
So, and it worked because they were able to defeat Nephilim in battle. So it wasn't about size and strength in that instance. So we also have accounts. I mean, you look at 2 Samuel 21:20, and there was yet a battle in Gath. So here you go. Gath's known for giants like Goliath and his brothers, where was a man of great stature, right, that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes. And then it calculates it so we don't misunderstand. Yeah, I mean 6 times 4, so 4 and 20, so 24 in number. And he also was born to the giant. So this was another thing that designated giants: 6 fingers, 6 toes. Doesn't mean that someone that's born with 6 fingers or 6 toes is of Nephilim heritage. However, it could mean that for sure. And then First Chronicles also talks about the same, and it says the son of a giant. So this has been clear in Scripture all along. Then you have Deuteronomy 2:10, the memes dwelt therein in times past, the people great and many and tall as Anakims, who are the sons of Anak. We just talked about earlier, they're Nephilim. It says Numbers, what was it, 13:33 or whatever. Oh, there it is on the screen. So the sons of Anak are also mentioned in Joshua and Judges. So these are Nephilim. These are giants. They came from the giants from before the flood, one way or the other. And then it says the people great and many as tall as the Anakim. So they're even as tall as the Anakims twice here. But Yahuwah destroyed them before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. So this is all over. It has been there all along. Now, the other thing that we know about the Tower of Babel is that the languages were confused, right? And we didn't really even get to that part of the story, so I'll cover that now. But let's talk about the language, because the language tells you something. There was only one language on the earth from creation up until the flood and even after, all the way to the Tower of Babel. One language. So here's what we know. If you find anything that is not that original language, then it comes from the Nephilim.
Right.
It's Nephilim. That's its origin. You look at the Sumerian tablets written by the Nephilim or Nephilim sympathizers. It's that paradigm, and they're writing in likely their language. Although I'll tell you, there's a guy who has studied the symbols and he's matched it up to ancient Hebrew, and he's actually making case right now. He wrote a book, and I'll mention it in a minute, that talks about that. So, but any language that's not Hebrew before Babel really belonged to the Nephilim. So in verse 22, back to Jubilees 10, and Yahuwah our Elohim said unto us, behold, there are one people, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be withholden for them. Yes, there's power in man uniting, even man uniting to do evil, to in rebellion against Yahuwah, and they will again. I mean, that happens, the day of judgment and just before it. That's where the world is headed right now. You look right now, I mean, look around, you see all of this. I mean, we're in it's got to be the weirdest election in all of history.
Right.
I've never, you have, Biden's debate performance, Biden stepping down, and then you have, Trump assassination attempt, regardless of what anybody thinks about it being contrived or not. The point is, all of these things are happening in one election cycle. It is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my lifetime anyway. It just doesn't make sense. And it seems like the world is falling apart because it is. Because out of that chaos will come the order of, the phoenix will rise out of the ashes, and that phoenix is not what we want. It will be, a one world government, and eventually it leads to the rise of the beast. But the most evil empire in all of history is rising right now as we speak.
I got a question for you, Tim. Did you see the closing ceremonies for the Olympic and the symbolism that, because it to me was Revelation 9, the Polly of Baden, the bottomless pit. It even depicted him on top of a pyramid of what looked like alien demonic creatures.
That's right.
And that, is on our currency, and he's the eye. But yeah, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's foreshadowing of what's coming. The dollar's falling. Right. It's really no longer the world reserve currency. It has been voted out of the OPEC nations as the petrodollar. And to think that these things will not affect the U.S. economy is nonsense. It's already affecting it. If you're going to the grocery store and you're buying, bread and eggs and things like that, and you're realizing that your dollar isn't getting what it used to, it's because inflation is upon us, but they're telling us it's not. But you know better. Exactly. Because you buy gas, right? I mean, we know things are increasing, and it's just a reality, and they can continue to play games with numbers all they want. But the reality is, even under this administration, I think someone calculated that the average household has to spend $700 a month more just to live, for the cost of living. Well, that's a lot of money. I mean, I live in the Philippines, and in the Philippines, they don't even make $700 a month.
Right.
It's amazing. So this is, it's not sustainable. And so everybody watching this, I think many are already awakened and aware. But if you're not already preparing, and especially in the U.S. right now, we all need to prepare.
Right.
Which is always wise. Always wise.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that says, let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Because they all spoke one language prior, and they may be dispersed into cities and nations, and one purpose will no longer abide with them till the day of judgment. So here you have Jubilees. Basically, Genesis is very similar in language, but you have it identifying that the world will not unite like this, like they did at the Tower of Babel in rebellion against Yahuwah, until the day of judgment, right? So, and again, it's,
Right.
you know, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the second coming of the Son of Man. It's
Yes.
all the same. You know, all of these ancient concepts are resurging. Why?
Right.
Because the occult religion rules the world. And the occult religion is the ancient religion of the Nephilim, with this aim. All along, it is in rebellion against Yahuwah. It's why it creates false science that attacks the foundations of the Bible, and it's fake science. It's not even real, and that's why they'll undermine anything, and they're willing to lie to do so. So we have to build our foundation and prove all things for ourselves, because if we don't, in this age, we're in a strong delusion, and we will be deceived.
Yes. Yes, we are in those times, without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt. But, you know, what's exciting is we're also in the days of increasing knowledge. Yes, evil
Yes.
knowledge, but also good knowledge. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, I firmly believe that, you know, the research we're doing and others, because we're not the only ones awakening right now.
Right.
There are many of us out there. And we may be the minority around the world, and that's okay, because that's what the Bible calls us a remnant.
Yes.
It doesn't say there's 1.5 billion believers. There are not. I wish there were,
Right.
but there are not. That's
Right.
not reality.
There's a passage. It says, "I will call you one from 1,000, two from 10,000," and
Yeah.
I calculated that, and you know, if the world's population is 7 billion people, that according to that math, which it's attributed to Christ, that's 1 million people, believers out of
Wow.
7 billion. That's a
You know, I don't know. I don't have any way to confirm that, but I mean, to my spirit, that witnesses. It's certainly not billions.
right. Yeah, I agree. I pray it's more, but yeah,
I do
that's
too. I wish that was
what the
wrong.
quote
I really
says.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we go on to verse 23, and Yahuwah descended, and we descended, the angels. See, the book of Jubilees was originally written by the angel of the presence,
Right.
according to the book, according to Moses. So when he says we, he's talking about the angels. So we descended with him to see the city and the tower, which the children of men had built. And he confounded their language, and they no longer understood one another's speech, and they ceased then to build the city and the tower. Verse 25, for this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babel. Okay, so a lot of people say, where is Babel? Babel and Shinar are the same. And yes, there are many that make a connection, Babylon and Babel, and that is an accurate etymology. There's nothing wrong with that, because Babylon is in essentially that area. Maybe not exact, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. Because Yahuwah did there confound all the language of the children of men, and from thence they were dispersed in their cities, each according to his language and his nation. Now, linguists forget that this happened. They try to ignore the Tower of Babel. And then they go back and say, well, you know, this language comes from this language, and this language comes from that language, and this one comes from that one. What they don't realize is this was a dispersion of languages that immediately the languages didn't come from one another. They came from Yahuwah, and they're not necessarily connected. Some are, but many are not. And then after that, you still have, you will have offshoots, you know, languages that come later. There was no, that we know of, English didn't exist at the time of Tower of Babel. You know, it came many, many, you know, thousands of years later. So we just don't know, you know, that it existed back then. There's no evidence of that, maybe, but there's no evidence of it. So language even continues to evolve and change. And I mean, you know, those of us Americans, you know, we're not speaking British English, you know. So the language is still changing, still evolving, even in front of our eyes. And believe me, go talk to a Brit, and they'll make it very clear that we don't speak English.
Right.
So when you look at this, the confusion, it's really very clear. I mean, it's, you look at all of the different concordances, and it's very well interpreted confusion. It's a confusion of languages, speech, stammering, casting away the second letter. So everything changed in these languages. And no surprise. I mean, Yahuwah was not trying to create similar languages so they could reconnect and continue to build. I mean, that was the whole point, is they couldn't communicate, so they had to stop building. Now then you have verse 25. And Yahuwah Elohim said, this is chapter 12, verse 25. If you fast forward in Jubilees, it's going to tell you the language of creation. It's going to tell you what the original language was, right? Now, some go back and they'll say the oldest tablet we have, rock carving, is Sumerian. Therefore, the Sumerian language is the origin of all languages. No, it's not. The rock doesn't date back to the beginning of mankind, so you wouldn't know that. It's also in a Nephilim society, meaning it's a Nephilim language.
Right.
Now, this isn't something that's been a mystery, because Jubilees has come right out and documented the original language since creation, which is the original language of the Bible. And Yahuwah Elohim said, open his mouth, talking about Abraham here, and his ears, that he may hear and speak with his mouth, with the language which hath been revealed. For it is ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from the day of the overthrow of Babel. Okay, so in the known world, right, in the Middle East especially, Hebrew disappeared. They stopped speaking it. And I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in Hebrew, in the tongue of creation. So what is the tongue of heaven? What is the tongue of creation? What is the first language? It's actually ancient Hebrew.
Right.
Not modern Hebrew, which has all kinds of new rules and really is Yiddish infused, Slavic infused, and it's just a melting pot of different languages that has new rules that couldn't possibly apply to the Bible, which has no vowel points and no way to disseminate. Even words like Yahweh, it's AH in the first part of the four-letter word in Hebrew, and it's EH in the second part. Well, where's that rule come from? It's got to be consistent. It's AH. It can't be, in a four-letter word, it can't change. Not if it's the original language, and it is. And really the origin of all languages, though they don't necessarily disseminate from it. And that's, to say that is to misunderstand what happened at Babel.
Yes.
There is a guy, I told you I'd mentioned the book, The World's Oldest Alphabet, by Dr. Douglas Petrovich. And he actually is making the connection, even in the Sumerian writings, that those characters, actually, when you tie them and you go back to ancient biblical Hebrew, they actually appear to be expressing the Hebrew. Now, I don't know that, and I can't really confirm it myself, but it's fascinating research, and it's a book worth reading. So there you go. And he has a video on this on YouTube. I have it on screen, so anybody can check that out. So then, as we continue with the story of Babel, back to chapter 10, verse 26. And Yahuwah sent a mighty wind against the tower and overthrew it upon the earth. He destroyed it. And when Yahuwah destroys, he utterly destroys. He didn't leave anything there for archaeology. And that's why none's been found. But we do know the archaeology of the peopling has been found. And that's not a mystery. And actually, that same doctor I just mentioned has actually done that work too. And behold, it was between Asher and Babylon in the land of Shinar. Okay, so where is Shinar? Well, it's on the east side of the Tigris River, and it's between Asher and Babylon. So Asher, we know that's a surviving reference. Assyria comes from Asher. One time there was a JW guy that I met with, and he's like, I'm talking about all this history and stuff, and he's like, yeah, well, what's the capital of Assyria? And I said to him, Asher. And he's like, no, it's Nineveh. Yeah, it was in the days of Jonah, late in the game. However, back in the origin, it was actually Ashur, because that's where the word Assyria comes from. So, you get that all the time. But so, and they called its name Overthrow in the 4th week in the 1st year, in the beginning thereof, the 4th and 30th Jubilee. See, Jubilees has very specific timing. And again, it's not all 100% from the Ethiopic, but it's pretty solid generally. Were they dispersed from the land of Shinar? So we even get a date, and even if you don't agree with it, its calculation, you can see that it progresses in time. You can get a rough idea of, things like, because there's legends that Shem was alive at that point, and actually, when you look at Jubilees, Shem would have been dead by then. There's a legend that Abraham was alive at the Tower of Babel, and yet Abraham was born like 180 years after that. So it doesn't quite work. Again, Jubilees has that timing, and it's all there. But you go to another thing that I think is important to point out here while we're on this. Who was the first man to write? Well, it wasn't a Nephilim, and it wasn't the Sumerian tablets. Yes, they're on rock and they've survived, that we can date back and figure it out, although their dating is based on what it says, and it assumes that the calculations are true in the writing. They can't actually date the rock that accurately whatsoever. However, for thus did Enoch, the father of your father, command Methuselah his son, and Methuselah his son, Lamech, and Lamech commanded me all the things which his fathers commanded him. So Enoch taught his son, and his son taught his son, and his son taught Noah. And, so ultimately, Enoch's teachings even crossed over the flood, but they're from before the flood. Why? Right. Because he was the first among men that are born on earth who learnt writing and knowledge and wisdom. This is Jubilees 4:16 through 19, where Moses is basically endorsing Enoch as the first human being to write anything, period. The first thing ever written by man's hands was the book of First Enoch.
Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah. So you
have you read the, it says all that in the Testament of the 12 patriarchs too, about the book of Enoch. And it says books of Enoch, which is interesting.
It does. Well, and even Jubilees in this passage, we covered this in the introduction of Enoch. In fact, I think even the forward, we actually write about Jubilees endorses the 5 books of First Enoch in this passage, specifically by titles and content. Right. So, and there's this misnomer out there that because the second section of the book of First Enoch is supposedly missing because it's not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, there are chapters of Genesis that aren't found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but do we go back to Genesis and then say, oh, but wait a minute, chapter 32 didn't exist because it wasn't found in the Dead Sea Scrolls? Really? No, we don't do that. And Enoch has actually the same track as Genesis as far as history is concerned. It's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's actually affirmed before, and it's affirmed after and throughout history. It may not in the Western world, we may have taken it out of the Bible canon, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't scripture at one time, and really shouldn't remain at least a useful text, if nothing else.
Yes, absolutely agree.
So this tells us, and what did Enoch write in? He wrote in Hebrew, right? But by the way, I'll tell you, in Qumran, did you know they found regarding the missing section? There are quotes there, by the way, that are quoting the second section in Qumran, and it's also quoted in the Bible. So you can find it multiple places being quoted. Therefore, it must have existed in order in the 1st century for the New Testament to quote it, in order in 100 BC for the local community in the Dead Sea to also quote it. So, but in addition to that, you have this endorsement in Jubilees of that second book. But then you have the editor of the scrolls themselves. I guess he worked for the Rockefellers. which is already a problem when you think about the Dead Sea Scrolls
Right.
and
Right.
everything there. He actually found a copy of the Book of Enoch. He said he saw that was sold off into the private market and taken
Right.
away from our eyes. And he said he even saw it on microfiche. So they put it on film,
Yeah.
and we should have access, but they won't give us access to that either. And it was a complete Aramaic version of the
Aramaic.
book.
Right.
Yeah. So, these things are, they've done a very shoddy job with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we've got some more research coming on that soon. Not just, in fact, you mentioned the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. That's one text we're working on right now, and we'll release those probably by the end of the year. We'll be publishing the book. So anyway, but again, any language that's not Hebrew before Babel really belonged to the Nephilim. And that's the dynamic that we're missing. The other thing here is, where is Shinar? Again, it's between Asher and Babylon is the land of Shinar. And Jubilee says, in another passage in chapter 9, verse 3, in Noah's division of the earth, and for Asher, Assyria is where, Asher's the origin of that whole people. Came forth the second portion, all the land of Asher, Nineveh, and Shinar. So it ties them. Where are these? They're all on, well, here it says, it ascendeth and skirteth the river. Nahar in Hebrew is actually the Tigris River. The Hebrew never uses the word Tigris. It calls this the river. Why? Because it's the river of abomination where the Tower of Babel was built. That's why it's Ha-Nahar 26 times in the Old Testament. And again, you see it here in Jubilees as well. Jubilees 8:21, Noah's division as well. He talks about the land of Elam, which is really western Iran, right next to Iraq, right there on the border. Asher, Babel, and Susan. Susan's also in Iran, next to the border. And Madai is modern Kurdistan. So is Nineveh. Nineveh's modern Kurdistan. So all of that area is very well defined. So there's no moving the Tower of Babel. We know where it was. There's this notion that the Tower of Babel was in America. No, it wasn't. These places are all too well recorded in history and scripture to go there. It couldn't possibly be in America. Then you have Genesis 10:10, which comes out and says, in the beginning of his kingdom, talking about Nimrod, was Babel, Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh. Now, these are surviving references. We know where Calneh is, especially on the east side of the Tigris River, just south of Nineveh, in the land of Shinar. So Shinar was south of Nineveh, and it was it's on the coast. It skirteth the river of the Tigris. So that was never really in question. We also know that the migration patterns from this age actually match. And again, here's a video you can go check out. And he's a doctor. He's got all the data well preserved. But he gives you the evidence of the migrations from the time of Babel and then where they dispersed to. It's not everywhere. Obviously, they went to other portions of the earth because they went all over the earth. And part of the fallacy in thinking in modern scholarship is they forget that the world knew about even as far as the Far East, even way back then. These were not mysteries, because Ophir, Sheba, and Tarshish migrated to the Far East in that age. So, and this is well preserved. The data's been there all along. So we also know that Genesis 11:2 says that Noah's descendants came to Shinar from where? They journeyed from the east. So they are east of Shinar. So I put a compass on the map here, so we can all see that what is east of Shinar. Well, you'd be in Iran there. That's kind of covered up. I didn't mean to do that on purpose, but I really wanted to show you. But it's the Himalayas. It's the mountains of Iran, and it's the Himalayas that are really east of Shinar. Turkey is north and doesn't work. And we find out, and we have videos on that, like, oops, did Ron Wyatt find the Nephilim mark? Who landed in Turkey on their Mount of Salvation? That's from the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's from the Book of Enki. The Nephilim did. They even tell you that these were demigods, part God, part man. So these are Nephilim that were on that ark. It tells you that they copied Noah. Why? Because the angels learned that that was the way to survive the flood. The watchers knew this. So they instructed some of the Nephilim to do the same thing. So there you go.
Intriguing.
So all of this is there, as well as we really cover in this book, the Book of Jubilees. This book is profound, and I encourage everyone to read it, whether you read ours or not. There's other versions. Ours is the R.H. Charles translation. We do publish the full 50 chapters here. It's a thick book, and we have a 100-page Torah test ahead of it. You can read this free in ebook. You don't have to buy the book. It's free in ebook. Just go to bookofjubilees.org and you can read it for yourself. And you don't need to wait. You can just download it. You can download it. It's a searchable PDF, so it's there for you. If you want it in print, it's nice, high quality, and it's there on Amazon and also Shopee in the Philippines and also on ophirinstitute.com, our book site. But on Amazon, it's also available in hardcover, in color. And also soft cover in color. And it's also in audiobook. And we just so you know, we used a virtual voice for that. It's not me. And you'll know that right away because it's a British female, but it's a really cool voice. And, you know, we thought it was a neat way to share Jubilee. So that is, in a nutshell, what we have on the Tower of Babel. There you go.
Well, brother, we have just, another 10 minutes remaining, but all of this information is very profound, and anything, with regard to the Nephilim and those cultures, we see that the demigods and many of these pagan pantheon of God cultures found worldwide. It's obvious once you understand the story that it is fully exposed in the book of Enoch on the fall of the Watchers and how the giants came about, and that there's been verification of skeletons found everywhere, of giants. There's stories of even the Paiute Indians here in Lovelock Cave, the conquistadors when they came through the Americas and in South America and Patagonia, all these places. There have been stories of the existence of these beings, and that is just further confirming witness for the veracity of the Bible. And so it's, it's beyond time for people to embrace and understand this as truth. And then once they do, the possibilities of understanding all of the underlying truths that unite everything and that confirm prophecy, it starts to make sense in a way that it could not previously.
That's right. And ultimately, what is the end result of this search that anyone goes on? Because, this is about the journey. It's a journey of awakening. It's increasing knowledge. And what happens? You'll end up believing the Bible. Imagine that.
Right. And what a incredible journey to begin for those that have not. Because again, the Bible is the inerrant word of the Most High God, and it is prophetic, 100% prophetic. So everything that you read and study and examine within it is inspired, and you can bank on that as well.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Right. And that's what is so amazing. And then understanding the canonical materials, like as you said and I said earlier, getting to Genesis and reading about these sons of God mating with the daughters of man, creating this race of giants, and how they became cannibals. And then the story of the Anakim and the Amalekites and how they were the arch nemesis for Israel. It helps us to understand why it was that the Israelites were commanded to wipe out every man, woman, and child, how they were
Exactly.
strange flesh, as is
Yeah.
cited in Jude and Peter.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, it also starts to give you a better picture of who Yahuwah is, because many
Yeah.
have the wrong picture. He was
Right.
not, he was compassionate in the Old Testament. He never changed.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
the flood was an act of compassion on his part.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And that's a critical part to understand as well, because the seminaries and the Sunday schools, they teach that it was the wickedness of man that led to the flood coming upon the earth and
That's right.
wiping out all flesh. But that's not the truth of the matter. As you said,
No,
it was an act of compassion and mercy
that's
for humanity.
well, I mean, think about it. Just watch the news. Are we not evil today? Is mankind not evil? Well, why aren't we
Right,
being wiped out already?
right, right. True
Did
that.
you see World War II, World War III, World War I, World War II? Why didn't Yahuwah act? And if he reacts to the evil intentions of man in such a way, and this is not what the flood was about. The fact is, there were very few human beings, pure human beings, even left on the earth.
Yeah.
Those that were, other than Noah and his family, were really in the camp of the Nephilim. Whether they were, modified or not, they were in the camp. So,
And they would have been wiped out. There would have been no flesh left, which
that's
I
right.
think, it says as in the days of Noah, and it speaks about, in the book of Giants, the miscegenation of all things, that
Yeah,
unless the days be shortened, there should be no flesh left. And
right.
there, these are certainly odd times. The genetically modified foods, all the
Yeah,
poisons that are being put into everything, the air, the food, the water, certainly makes sense to me.
yeah, me too. And the thing is that it's all coming together. When you get the whole Nephilim narrative, your understanding of the Bible it just becomes so much more profound. It changes everything, and in a good way. Because again, without it, the Bible becomes unbelievable.
Right.
Because they're manipulating it. They're watering it down literally in the flood, and even the flood. They're saying, there's one blogger who attacked us. Oh, the flood was only 22 feet of water. Really?
Oh my God.
Can you read? Because why would Noah need to build an ark, and why would animals need to be brought from all over the earth for a flood that was 22 feet where the ark wouldn't even float? Oops.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
they would have been better. The animals, most of them, would have been better to stay in their habitats, because
Right.
those weren't flooded, evidently. Not in 22 feet of water. It's a bathtub.
Exactly. It's intriguing. In the Targum, it mentions that the animals were brought to the ark by the angels, which is
That's
an
right.
interesting concept as
Did you
well.
know Enoch says that too? First Enoch says that too.
Oh, okay. No, I don't recall that, but I will
Yeah. We
definitely
have a
check it out
video on
again.
that, actually. I don't remember the exact title, but it's something like how did all the animals, how did Noah gather the animals, I think it's called. And the
Right
reality
on.
is Noah didn't gather any. The angels
Right.
did that.
Exactly. Exactly.
They came to him.
Yeah.
So
Well, brother, we've got just 3 minutes remaining. If you would just reiterate where people can go to find and support your work and buy your books, and what the latest title for your most recent book project.
yeah. Okay, so the new series and small group study that we released is called the Lost Isles of Gold live series, and small group study guide, and it's available again on Amazon and worldwide. On Shopee in the Philippines. We will actually make it available in bulk at some point to organizations and even churches if they'll do it. It doesn't matter if they do or not, but if they will use it, we'll make it available to them. We have 11 other books in addition to that available on Amazon. You can check them out. Everything from our findings of Ophir, the Garden of Eden, the rivers from Eden, all the way to our publishing of Jubilees, First Enoch, Second Esdras. There's a lot of books there to take in, and just one at a time, check them out and see what you think. You can test it for yourself because that's the way we operate, like researchers, because that's what we are. And then we have our book website, ophirinstitute.com, our main website, thegodculture.com. And if anybody's anywhere near the Philippines or want to fly here, September 21st and 22nd, we'll have our large conference with over 5,000 expected in attendance here at the USEP, University of Southeast Philippines, I think it's called, Sports Dome. And we are jazzed about that and look forward to meeting anybody who can make it.
All right. Well, thank you, brother, again for your information and for your willingness to join us. It's good to be back with everybody. I appreciate everyone.
Good to have you back.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here with you. I'm so glad my voice was able to hold out. But thank you, brother, for coming on with Lisa and all the shows that you've done previously. But
anytime.
Yeah. Thank you, and have a great conference. Be blessed all. Good night.
All right. You too. Yah bless.
Shalom.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.